They say that all exercises are created equal, but if you look at every single effective strength program that trains genetic freaks, that statement is simply not true. In fact, I believe there are only 3 exercises that are needed for you to get more explosive, stronger, and more athletic. We're gonna show you those 3 exercises and how you can use them so you can become a genetic freak, and we're gonna start right now.
The concept of impulse expression, applying a massive amount of force in a short period of time, is imperative when we're thinking about developing a successful athlete. If we look at athletes in distance running, throwing, football, lacrosse, swimming, all of these different spectrums of sport, they will have some type of benefit from executing the snatch. Where these sports differ might be the amount of time they have to apply a massive amount of force. If you think about a football player, an offensive lineman, they might have a half second to a second to apply force when they're making contact with an opponent. Now, if you look at a distance runner, each time that they actually put their foot into the ground is when they have to apply a large amount of force. So if we're looking at applying a massive amount of force in a short period of time, this is where something like the power snatch will come into play. You want to move this as quickly as possible. Boom! Okay? What's crazy is that power snatch and even the muscle snatch, oftentimes when they're measured with VBT, the muscle snatch will even be faster than the power snatch. It doesn't appear that way, but it actually is how it works. You'll apply force into the bar and it'll move at 2.5 to 3 meters per second. Now, full range of motion movements will allow the body to essentially use every single muscle, every single joint, and it will be more stable in every single angle, hopefully. So if we're doing a full snatch right here, we want to think about first, setting our grip. Second, setting our back, making sure our back's nice and tight. There's going to be flexion. There's going to be extension. There's going to be rapid forces applied through your foot and then get into those hands overhead. There's going to be forces crossing every single joint, and that's what makes this movement so freaking versatile. Yvonne. When applied in the sporting realm. The snatch requires a lot of speedy coordination. Athletes thrive when they're faster. This is where impulse comes into play, and if we can understand the 3 major factors that go into impulse, it's going to be average velocity, peak velocity, and rate of force development. So we've got to remember that's the factor behind impulse. So that's going to lead to developing a massive amount of force in that short period of time when we're discussing the snatch. If you look at how quickly it's done in 1 to 2 seconds, very, very rapidly. And I even like to use the example of Ryan Krauser. He's a world record holder, arguably one of the best track and field athletes of all time. He snatched 140 kilos from his hip at 2.78 meters per second. That's absurdly fast. Take impulse completely out of it, right? Now we start to look at if you can sit in the bottom position with that thoracic extension and your hips nice and mobile, sitting down deep in between your heels. Now we see that there's a mobility factor that can lead to positive attributes that over time will help with structural integrity, which can also potentially prevent injuries. Essentially, muscles that can hold longer positions can lead to greater recruitment.
But what about looking at impulse from a slower movement?
Let's look at impulse on that short timeline, moderate to decent force production. Think about that through that high velocity curve relative to the load of the bar. And how are we gonna do that? We're gonna look at exercise 2.
The back squat.
Or the front squat. So when we're looking at something like the back squat or the front squat, we can initially see if we're gonna increase load on the bar, we're gonna see an improvement in dynamic trunk control. We're gonna see an improvement in maximum strength. If we see blast impulse, okay, and that's a massive amount of force applied in a short period of time, we can do 1 to 2 reps of the squat, back squat or front squat, at higher loads, and that will improve blast impulse. We can also do it at lighter loads and move it very, very fast, and that will also improve blast impulse. The rep schemes of 4 to 7 reps have a positive impact on sustained impulse. And then if we're looking at power endurance, think about wrestlers. One of the big things that I did this past year with the South Dakota State wrestling team as they prepared for the season was we were hitting back squats of like 7 to 12 reps on their drop sets to really get that power endurance in place so that they could build on that throughout the entire season. So if we're looking at the speeds, we can understand that the squat is going to apply force in a longer period of time when compared to the snatch. So if we're squatting a little bit lighter, we might move it at 0.8 meters per second, maybe a little bit faster if you're really athletic, really coordinated. And if you're going at max effort, you might see it move all the way down to like 0.28 to 0.3 meters per second. That's typically where we'll see that failure actually occur. Even though the timeline is longer and it's a slower movement in comparison, there's still a large amount of force being applied, and thus the velocity related to the load on the bar will still be higher. That's 2 exercises. What about the third? It has to be an upper body exercise. Is it the overhead press? Is it pull-ups? Maybe the miracle grow? Nope, it's the bench press. Now remember, when we're thinking about athletes, we're looking at this movement pattern through the lens of impulse. So what kind of force production are we looking at in that designated period of time? Remember back to peak velocity, average velocity, rate of force development. That's what we're thinking through.
So you set the pecs, you pack the lats, okay? You engage that upper back, bring that down and explode.
So you're training the shoulders, the triceps, the pecs, all to recruit as rapidly as possible with that elbow extension. It's also important to note that when we're training an agonist muscle group or specific muscle that gets really, really strong, typically the antagonist muscles, so in this case, if we're pressing, okay, the lats, the rhomboids, the upper back, that entire area will get pulled up with strength, but it's also going to get triggered and strengthened by the work that we're doing with the snatch. And you can use slow eccentrics to make sure that there's more time under tension, but make sure that you're using as much force as possible when you're doing a concentric portion of the movement. You should always bench with that press being done with the intent to move it as fast as possible. That's where we want that impulse development to occur. But can you build an entire program with just 3 lifts? So when we're looking at a full program using just these 3 lifts, we can get really creative and we can look at technical coordination. This is gonna help us with that elasticity, okay? Then we can look at that absolute strength. That's gonna help us get swole, that accessory hypertrophy work. Now we're getting freaking yoked. So that day might be built out as each day being impulse based. Develop impulse as that main quality. Now, that's gonna take us into day 1. Let's prioritize the snatch here. So we're gonna go heavy on the snatch. We wanna focus on catching big time weight, trying to push that technique with higher loads. That's gonna help us with that overhead stability. That's gonna help us improve our mobility. The other unwritten aspect around the snatch is that as a coach, if you have someone doing the snatch, you'll see how that individual learns technique. Every single sport that you will be doing, you have to learn technique. Then we're gonna get into that big time back squat. So let's say we do 8 singles of snatch, then we can go back squat, 5 sets of 5, something like that, and we can finish with a floor press. Now I wanna think about full range of motion on the floor press, all the way elbows down to the knees and explode on the way up. That's gonna transfer later on with that lockout on a heavier bench press. Day 2, let's say we take a day off. Day 2, we can just focus on power snatches. So move that weight fast. Let's say it's like 65 to 70% of your best. 65 to 70% of what you hit on this day, you're gonna do here. Maybe you do 5 doubles, maybe you do 4 triples, something like that. And then we get into the bench press and we wanna see a nice response from the bench press. And ironically now, that power snatch is gonna wake up our nervous system, so now we can recruit a little bit more effectively at higher speeds on the bench, and we can go 4 triples and then build up to a drop set of 7, drop set of 9, and then finally we can do some unbroken front squats or pause front squats. Then we're gonna get into the muscle snatch. We wanna move this around 2.5 to 3 meters per second if we're capable. This is usually gonna be around 50 to 60% of our best. So this is another factor where it's like, all right, let's focus on the speed. Let's focus on the acceleration. That's gonna prep us for a big double bounce back squat. We're using a variation. We're getting that co-contraction from the back squat. And that's another big factor here is that when you use a back squat, especially with the double bounce, 1, you're getting an extra stretch shortening cycle. 2, you're gonna get that hip co-contraction as you're coming through out of the bottom. Then we get into that pause dumbbell bench. Pause, boom. Pause, boom, full range of motion, lengthen that muscle, apply a massive amount of force in a short period of time. Rate of force development, peak velocity on all of these different lifts, that's what's going to lead to the development of this impulse system with those 3 basic foundational movements. So is this feasible for sports performance? And in all reality, we have to remember, during COVID, this is essentially exactly what Nick Singleton was doing. We would do a snatch or a clean, then we would usually do a front squat because he would clean it, then front squat it, and then we'd do floor benches with the bar or with heavy dumbbells. That was all he did for 3 to 4 days a week, every single day. So this is feasible, but is it the absolute best for sports performance? You could and can, but should you add other things? For sure, but you don't have to. Athletes can adapt to really high speed movements like the snatch, and then they can also adapt to a massive amount of load from that mechanical tension that they'll get from the bench press and from the back squat. And that will all lead to their nervous system recruiting faster. And then they're gonna take the crazy strength gains and then apply it directly into their sporting realm. These are the exercises that we have built our strength training app Peak Strength entirely around. These are the 3 pillar exercises. And we've got over 700 other movements that you guys can use to have that dynamic correspondence, which then takes that work in the weight room out onto the field, the court, wherever it is that you are looking to be successful. If you need help with your strength training, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You can download Peak Strength today. You'll get 5 free workouts and you'll be on the roll to lead to that dynamic correspondence.
Because remember, if you want to become a genetic freak, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.